Hello everyone, my name is Delicacy, and this is Video Delicacies, where we seek to taste the greatest flavors that old games have to offer. I just played Star Fox 64, which was developed by Nintendo EAD and published by Nintendo. It was released for the Nintendo 64 in 1997 and was remade for the Nintendo 3DS in 2011. Star Fox 64 itself is a remake, at least narratively speaking, of Star Fox, released for the Super Nintendo in 1993. So, a while back I got really obsessed with the game Sin and Punishment, which is a rail shooter for the Nintendo 64 developed by Treasure. That game was originally only released in Japan, but it was made available internationally through the Wii Shop channel preceding the release of its Wii sequel, which is how I got into it. After showing the game to a friend of mine, he recommended that I play Star Fox 64. It was a good recommendation. I knew of Star Fox through Smash Bros, of course, but I hadn't really considered that maybe that kind of game was for me prior to getting into Sin and Punishment. I bought a copy of the game and played about a half hour of it before losing interest, and it's languished on my shelf ever since. After tackling a long RPG in my previous video, I wanted to play something shorter for this one, and so I thought of Star Fox 64. It's been over a decade since my original experience with the game, so I thought that maybe now was the time to give it a second chance. I played the game on my Nintendo 64. This game contains a lot of flashing and flickering, so please be wary. When I powered on Star Fox 64, I was immediately greeted by its opening cutscene. There was an urgent message from General Pepper that Andross was invading the Lylat system, and the army needed the help of the mercenary unit Star Fox. Then there was a shot of the 4 members of the Star Fox team running to their battle stations. There's the excitable Slippy Toad, veteran Peppy Hare, cool guy Falco Lombardi, and our protagonist, Fox McCloud. Each of these 4 pilots boarded their own R-Wing and blasted off toward Corneria to lend the General their aid. Upon starting a new game, I got slightly more backstory. Andross had attacked Corneria once before, but he was driven back to the planet Venom. The original Star Fox team, consisting of Fox's father, James McCloud, along with Peppy Hare and Pigma Dengar, went to Venom to check up on Andross. However, Pigma betrayed the others and only Peppy escaped. The first mission of the game was called Corneria, Former Army Base, Enter Star Fox. Our R-Wings started out flying over the sea as we approached Corneria City. I checked to see if there was an effect for skimming over the water, and there sure was. You move around using the analog stick, with vertical movement being inverted. You can fire lasers by tapping the A button. By holding the A button, you can charge a bigger laser, and if your reticle passes over an enemy while charging, you'll lock onto them, ensuring that the laser will be fired in that target's direction. Collecting silver and gold rings restores some of your health, which is the meter in the top left. And every 3rd gold ring you collect also increases your maximum health. There are also power-ups that enhance your ship's lasers. You can press C down to slow down, or press C left to speed up at the cost of your boost, which is the meter in the top right. Enemies will sometimes target your wingmates. You should protect them whenever possible, if not from the kindness of your heart, then because they'll help you out in return later. You can move left and right quickly by pressing Z or R, respectively, and double tapping those buttons will do a barrel roll, which gives you brief invulnerability from projectiles. Corneria ended with a mech boss that I defeated before I could really tell what was going on. Each stage ends with the members of the team reporting in, and any of them that survived the mission get healed a little bit. My second stage was Meteo, Asteroid Field, into the asteroid field. As you might expect, this level is full of asteroids. Some can be destroyed with your lasers, but some cannot. You can fire bombs by pressing the B button. Your bomb count is shown below your boost in the top right. Bombs are not a full screen clear as they are in mini shooting games, but they are a strong area attack. They detonate upon contacting an enemy, but you can detonate them sooner by pressing the B button a second time. You can do a somersault by pressing C left while pulling back on the analog stick. This allows you to grab items stacked vertically like these, but its main use is to get behind an enemy who is on your tail. There was a section here where I needed to slow down and speed up in order to avoid being crushed in between asteroids. Controlling your speed to avoid colliding with obstacles will be a major mechanic in this game going forward. The terrain can often be more dangerous than enemy ships. Robot Operating Buddy 64 back on the Great Fox will sometimes send you a message. If you receive the message by pressing C right, a package containing a power-up will appear in front of you. This time, Rob sent me a bomb, but when I went to retrieve it, I was attacked from behind. It seemed really rude of the game to trick me like that. A little later on, I encountered this moth creature. My laser couldn't lock onto it, and I had a really hard time avoiding its attacks. I got so distracted trying to fight this thing that I missed the checkpoint. Shortly after that was the boss. It started with a phase where it had 4 weak points with a Pac-Man-shaped shield protecting 3 of them at a time. It's important to note that the R-Wing's laser can't lock onto bosses the way that it can most enemies, so these need to be aimed at manually. After destroying those first 4 targets, we went to phase 2, where the boss fires a big lightning attack and the weak point is directly in its center. Then there was a third phase with weak points on top and bottom, and big waves shooting out from the left and right. This proved to be too much for me. Since I had missed the checkpoint, I was sent all the way back to the start of the stage 6 minutes earlier. On my second try, I reached the boss with significantly more health, and so I was able to beat it pretty easily. Once again, the whole team survived the mission. The next stage that I played was Fortuna, former defense post, enter Starwolf. Oh, now I remember why I stopped playing this game the last time that I tried it. Okay, so most of this game is a rail shooter. You can maneuver your ship around the screen and you can control your speed to a degree, but you're generally traveling one direction down a straight corridor. Occasionally the game goes into what it calls all-range mode, where you can fly your ship freely around an open arena. The inclusion of these segments comes across as really insecure to me. It feels like they were worried that people would be frustrated about not being able to take their ship off the rails. And maybe they were right to worry about that. I remember people making that complaint about Pokémon Snap when it came out 2 years after this. But regardless of what the audience might have expected at the time, I came to this game fully wanting the rail shooter experience, and this was not what I signed up for. All-range mode just feels so much slower and clumsier to me in comparison with the rest of the game. After flying around firing at enemy ships for a while, Star Fox's rivals, Starwolf, appeared and began to attack us. Starwolf has 4 members, one paired opposite each member of Star Fox, with their leader, Wolf O'Donnell, mirroring our hero Fox McCloud. I tried my best to fight off the Starwolf ships attacking my friends, but in the commotion of battle I accidentally fired at Peppy, who then had to withdraw. Shortly after that, Andrew shot down Slippy, and then it wasn't much longer before I was down too. It was a mess. Falco sounded so disappointed in me. No! I like the Starwolf characters, I think that they're a great part of this game, and the dogfighting is conceptually cool, but I just found playing this part to be frustrating and disorienting. On my second try, I was able to complete the stage by surviving until a bomb went off. Wolf declared victory, but at least I didn't have to play this anymore. Peppy and Slippy had been shot down, but Falco hung on and got to move on with me to the next mission. One thing that Star Fox 64 is well known for that I haven't talked about yet is its voice acting. Years before I ever played this game, I had heard all of its most famous lines referenced again and again by people a little too into gaming culture. I've even been guilty of it myself. Playing this game was like seeing a big movie for the first time and hearing the actual deliveries for a bunch of lines that you're used to hearing your older brother imitate. It was kind of surreal. Anyway, here are my top 10 favorite lines of voice acting that I heard while playing Star Fox 64. Number 10.
Never give up! Trust your instinct!
Number 9.
You're not getting away that easy!
Number 8.
Is that any way to greet a girl?
Number 7.
Jeez Louise, what is that?
Number 6.
And the great deal!
Number 5.
I can't believe I lost to this scum!
Number 4.
You know that I control the galaxy.
Number 3.
Destroy all 3 energy balls!
Number 2.
What the heck?
And of course, number 1 is the iconic.
Good luck.
You might notice that I didn't select any of Pigma's lines. I don't want to support anything that pervert says. My 4th mission was called Sector X, Combat Zone, Mystery of the Space Base. It started out easily enough, just flying through open space with clear shots on small groups of enemy ships, but then we entered the base and things went downhill fast. I lost over half of my health in a couple of seconds, and I wasn't sure why. A little further in, my old enemy the Moth showed up, and they again dealt a lot of damage to me, but they didn't stop me from grabbing the checkpoint this time. I then flew past a big robot arm, but before I had the chance to consider what that meant, I needed to quickly make the choice of two paths. I went to the left. There were some giant blast doors on this path that I needed to manipulate my speed to get through safely. It could have gone better. Once the two paths reconverged, Slippy unexpectedly reappeared with a fresh new health bar. Then the boss showed up, assembling itself from parts that I had flown past before. That's a cool concept. The boss's weak point was on its head, and it could attack with either eye lasers or by swatting at me with its arms. Once the boss's health got below a certain threshold, the game tried to fake me out by displaying it as empty instead, but I noticed the sudden jump and wasn't fooled. Slippy, however, fell right for it and was sent flying to a nearby planet. Oh, this is why Slippy showed up in the middle of the mission. It was so that this scene could happen. I only had a pixel of health left at this point, so I unfortunately was not able to beat the boss on this attempt. On my second time through, I took the right path instead of the left. This path had many more enemies, but the terrain was much easier to deal with. This seems like it's probably the better path to take. I entered the boss fight with my health full this time, and I had no problem winning. Rob identified the location of Slippy's distress signal, and so we followed it to the next mission. Titania, Arid Desert, the search for Slippy. Peppy's repairs were complete, so he joined Fox and Falco, who were just openly flirting with each other.
I think you look better in the tank. Why don't you come down here, Falco?
For this mission, rather than piloting an R-Wing, I was given control of a Landmaster. It controls similarly, but being ground-based makes it much easier to tell where you are in relation to other things in the environment. I enjoyed this level quite a bit. I needed to watch out for landmines, the tank's ancient nemesis, though Peppy taught me that the Landmaster could hover by holding both C and R. He also reminded me that I could do a barrel roll, which for the Landmaster involves flipping acrobatically sideways. Falco was defeated for the first time here, but shortly after we located Slippy in the clutches of a giant monster. This was a fun boss, but a pretty simple one. At the start, you can shoot off each of the boss's 4 arms, and once you free Slippy, he joins the fight. After that, it's just a matter of blasting the creature's heart until it explodes. Falco was down, but Peppy and Slippy were in prime condition going into the penultimate mission, Bolse Defense Post, The Last Hurrah. This was another all-range mode one. I needed to find and destroy 6 towers, supplying energy to a barrier covering the structure in the middle of the map. I could follow the energy streams themselves to find the towers, but touching them directly would result in a lot of damage. After the barrier was lowered, the Starwolf team appeared. The goal was to attack the weak points on the central structure while fending off the enemy ships. I found it less frustrating than the previous Starwolf encounter, mainly because the objective was so much clearer this time. Doing passes on the tower was kinda fun. It was difficult though, and I lost 2 lives here before eventually succeeding. Slippy wasn't able to hold out, but Peppy still had most of his health, and Falco was ready to deploy now as well. It was time for the final stage, Battle with Andross, Venom, Andross's homeworld. This stage starts out by going through a canyon with several splitting paths. Falco and Peppy went different directions, and I followed Peppy. There were a lot of enemies here, but nothing too challenging. After that, a see right indicator flashed on the screen, which until now had always meant an incoming message from Rob. But this time, it was a menacing call from Andross. It really set the tone that I was not safe here. We then flew into this giant-sized temple to what is probably my favorite part of the game that I saw on this run. I was chasing this robot covered in stone armor which could be blown off plate by plate. It was a cool challenge because it required me to aim at fairly precise targets while also manipulating my R-Wing's speed and position to avoid obstacles. This fight is a really good demonstration of what I think this game does well. Once its armor had been destroyed, I could shoot at this thing's fleshy head. It was kind of gross. Fox declared that he'd go it alone and then flew ahead to fight the final boss by himself. Andross is a giant floating head with 2 hands. The hands have weak points in their palms, similar to iRock from Super Mario 64. Shooting one of Andross's eyes causes the opposite palm to become vulnerable for a short while. Once both hands have been eliminated, Andross's entire head becomes a weak point, and from there it's smooth sailing. I defeated this boss in 1 try. That concluded my first playthrough of the game, but there was still so much to do. Star Fox 64 has a branching structure that's straight out of Outrun, with most stages leading to 2 possible other ones. The route you take is determined by actions you perform within the missions themselves. After each stage, you're returned to the map screen, which shows the route that you've taken so far and offers a nice moment to breathe in between the action. Also, you're able to spin the map around and zoom it out if you want to. There's no reason to do this. Early 3D games just loved giving the player the thrill of rotating an object. My first run had taken the bottom route through the game, which I think is probably true for a lot of people's first times. It's sort of the default one. I wasn't about to make this video without seeing all of the different missions, so beginning with my second run, I allowed myself to look up how to get the alternate routes. I found this map from DDJ on Game FAQs, which had exactly the information that I needed. Using that as my reference, I fired up a new game. I once again started out in Corneria, but this time I did things differently. To get the alternate exit, I needed to fly through each of these rock formations. The game gave me a hint that I was on the right track after the third one by having Falco complement my flying. Falco, not one to be upstaged, then showed off by flying through a waterfall, leading to a completely different boss than the one that I fought the first time that I played this stage. I took that down, and it was on to Sector Y, Combat Zone. This was a space level where I was attacked by mechs that looked kind of like gyms from Mobile Suit Gundam. The goal for the top route was to score 100 points, and I had 105 going into the boss. The boss fight was in all range mode, but it was easy, so I have no complaints. Next up was Aquas Ocean, Terror of the Deep. This one was a surprise to me. I knew about the Landmaster because it appears in Smash Bros, but I didn't know that there was a submarine vehicle in this game as well. While piloting the Blue Marine, you only have a 2D reticle to see where your normal shots go, and also you can't charge up a larger shot. However, your bombs are replaced with an infinite supply of homing torpedoes, which will target whatever enemy you're locked onto. The lock-on happens automatically, which can be annoying because it takes away the reticle you use to aim your laser. This is one of the few missions in the game that only has one path leading out of it, so I didn't have to worry about completing any special objectives this time. The boss here was a giant clam. Its weak points were 2 columns, which needed to be attacked first with lasers to make them vulnerable and then finished off with torpedoes. After that, I just needed to attack the eye. Peppy was really rude here to Slippy for absolutely no reason.
Slippy's not such a screw-up after all.
Thanks a lot, Peppy.
Come on, this wasn't even the timeline where Slippy got separated from the rest of the team. Anyway, the fourth mission of the run was Zone S, Toxic Waste Area, Invasion Aftermath. I was flying over water in this level, but unlike in Corneria, there's no skimming over the surface because touching it will repel you. I guess it's toxic even to ships. The objective to stay on the top route was to eliminate all of the searchlights. If one of them reaches the camera, you get spotted. I took out the first 20 of them no problem, but then one slipped by me and so I was unable to complete the objective. The boss here was extremely fun. It could only be damaged using bombs, but the cannonballs it fired dropped bombs if I destroyed them. It would also send barrels at me across the water. If these reached me, they would send up pillars of flame, but if I shot them, they would sometimes drop health. It was a little confusing what parts of the boat I needed to be attacking, but once I figured that out, it was a good time. Since I failed to stay on the top path, it was then down to the middle for the next mission, Macbeth, Venom Army Supply Base, The Forever Train. Incredible title. This was a Landmaster level and it was another really fun one. In general, I liked this set of levels more than the ones I saw on my first playthrough, but this one and the one before it especially were real standouts. I'm basically always happy to see a train level in a game though, so I might be biased in this case. The really cool part comes in at the boss. There was a series of 8 switches alongside the tracks and I needed to shoot all of them. I needed to succeed at this in order to get back on the top path, so anytime that I failed I intentionally crashed in order to go back to the checkpoint. Once all 8 switches were hit, a final switch appeared and shooting that switch caused the boss's train to drive straight into their supply base and detonate. Since I was now back on the upper route, my next stage was Area 6, Defense Station, through the middle. The planet Venom was looming in the distance just ahead of me and all that was left was to blast through the enemy ships in my way. It was very cool as a dramatic set piece. I managed to destroy 2 moths here, which really demonstrated how much I had improved in just these 2 runs. The boss was a big circle thing. Destroying its tentacles would cause it to open, revealing weak spots within. Once it had taken enough damage, it fired a big laser, which I will not be showing in this video, because it made the entire screen flash rapidly changing colors. The final mission was called The Final Battle, Venom, Andross's Homeworld. This was a different Venom mission than the one that I had gotten before. Starwolf, who I had managed to avoid seeing this entire run until now, showed up right at the start of the stage. There was no goal here except to defeat the 4 members of their team. I had 6 lives going into this, meaning that I had 7 attempts at it. You would think that that would be plenty, but I just on a fundamental level do not understand how to play all range mode. For some reason it just doesn't click with me, I can't do it. On my final attempt I was able to take down the Great Leone, but that was the only time I was able to beat any of the members of Starwolf in these 7 tries. And so my second run ended in failure. Even so, I still managed to beat my high score from the winning one. Let's pause here for a moment to discuss boxes. Before we get to Star Fox 64, I want to show you the Super Famicom box for the original Star Fox because it looks absolutely incredible. It's such an interesting choice to render the characters in this style, but they look super cute. I also wanted to show you this because I love the logo with the foxtail coming out of the X. Some later games logos will revisit this concept, but none of the other ones we'll be looking at today have the tail. Okay, let's start with the North American box. The red bar on the right side was universal across NA Nintendo 64 boxes, so the cover art needed to be composed with it in mind. The art is fine, it shows off the designs for the Great Fox and the R-Wing well enough, but I would rather we got a better look at the animal characters instead. Fox is the only one here, and this render doesn't do much to capture his appeal. The logo is not as good as the one with the tail, but it's okay. I like the shape of the 6 and the 4, but the texture on them is really weird. By the way, since I got this game used, I didn't get the Rumble Pack that's being advertised as coming with it. I have to assume that Nintendo felt this game's support of the Rumble feature was an important component of the game for them to bundle the two together, but it's not something that I had as part of my experience. In PAL regions, this game was called Lylat Wars, but the box was largely the same otherwise. This is the Australian version here. I like how the logo incorporates the Star Fox insignia as a replacement for the 64 in the title. In Japan, Nintendo 64 boxes were oriented in portrait rather than landscape, so they tend to look very different from other regions. There's a lot going on here, much more than I have time to talk about in this segment. What stands out to me the most is the badge-shaped frame. It's such an odd choice. This isn't a game about being a cop, and it's not even really a game about being a soldier, so why a badge? It even says Space Outlaw on it. What kind of outlaw carries a badge? That aside, I love the use of the low poly character models. Slippy especially looks really cute here. And speaking of Slippy, here's Star Fox 64 3D, the 3DS version, where he gets to join Fox on the cover. I like the art here. To me, it's a better execution of the concept, largely thanks to the really bold colors. The bright pink laser, combined with space being drawn as blue rather than black, really helps this box out a lot. Before taking another swing at the final battle, I decided to check out the 3 missions that I hadn't seen yet. To start, I needed to get onto the middle path. I did this by clearing Sector Y with fewer than 100 points, but my teammates were not happy with me. That led to Katina, Frontline Base, Reunion. This is an all-range mode mission, but a fairly simple one. There were allied ships fighting enemy ships here. I just needed to shoot down the enemy ships until weak points appeared on the enemy mothership and then shoot those weak points. There was a time limit, but I beat it with plenty of time to spare. Doing that took me to the next mission, Solar, Out of the Frying Pan. The heat here continuously damages your ship, but the rocks that occasionally erupt out of the lava drop health if you shoot them. The boss is a giant mantis who likes to splash around like a little kid in a swimming pool. It was a little stressful to see my health continuously draining during the fight, but I was able to win without much difficulty. Then there was only one mission remaining. To get there, I needed to complete the stealth objective in Zone S. Doing so led me to Sector Z Combat Zone, the Ambush of Great Fox. This was another all-range mode stage, pretty similar to Katina. The Great Fox was under attack by enemy ships. After shooting down enough of them, giant enemy missiles started approaching. The first wave was only 1 missile, the second wave was 2 missiles, and the final wave was 3 missiles. After destroying all 6 of them, the mission was over. Now that I had seen every stage in the game, all that was left to do was complete the only one of them that I hadn't beaten yet, the final battle. There were a few things that made this fight more difficult than the other Starwolf encounters. One is that the enemy ships will do a barrel roll to dodge the first hit against them, so you have to hit them several times in succession for it to count. That means that you can't rely on homing attacks alone. Keeping them on your screen long enough to hit them multiple times is extremely difficult though. Another thing is that when an enemy is on your tail, you're normally able to somersault to get behind them. But in this fight, they're smart enough to scatter when you try to do this to them. So what would be the best opportunity to attack is just gone. After many attempts, I found that this trick does kind of still work, but to pull it off you have to somersault really early. If they've started firing at you, it's already too late, so you really have to keep an eye on the minimap to know when someone is coming up from behind. And of course, this is the only Star Wolf fight where you're actually required to win. In Fortuna, you can complete the mission merely by surviving long enough, and in Bolse, you just need to destroy the tower. So I failed to learn what the earlier versions of the fight were trying to teach me and had to figure it all out in the hard version. It wouldn't be much of an exaggeration to say that this was the only challenging part of the game for me. There were a handful of missions that took 2 or 3 tries, but lives were always abundant, so it wasn't a big deal. It took me 34 attempts across 5 different runs to win the final battle. I don't mind a hard game, but this was a relatively easy game with one disproportionately hard stage at the very end. When I finally won, it was by carrying in weapon power-ups from Area 6, the previous mission. Your lasers can be powered up twice, but if your ship gets destroyed, your weapon returns to its base power level. That means that your first attempt at any given boss will have more firepower than any retries. I made that first try count and took out all 4 members of Star Wolf. But the game wasn't over yet. Andross still remained. Luckily, there was an extra life at the entrance to this fight, so I wasn't in danger of game overing at this point. Phase 1 was very similar to the Andross fight from before, but with this added attack where he would chomp on Fox's R-Wing and spit it back out. If I managed to dodge this, he would spit out asteroids which could be destroyed for health and bombs, making this a pretty safe fight once I'd learned to avoid that one attack. For Phase 2, it was back to all-range mode. First I had to destroy both of Andross's eyes. These behaved pretty similar to the Star Wolf ships, but they moved much more slowly, making them pretty easy to deal with. After that I had to take down the brain, which was a lot more awkward. Its weak point was on its lower back. I was able to get behind it by somersaulting, but since it was so big I would need to be right in front of it to do so, and if I ever touched it directly I would get stuck in a grab that dealt a ton of damage. Finding windows to attack was difficult, but eventually I managed to take Andross to task. After that, the game ended with an escape sequence where Fox's father's ghost leads him out of Andross's facility as it self-destructs. This part was extremely cool. It was possible to fail here, which I did once, but thankfully there was a checkpoint after the boss. On my second try, I used the boost to keep up and was able to make it out alive. There's a really sweet moment here when James delivers a line that we've heard Peppy say many times.
Never give up. Trust your instincts.
So let's talk about some of the positives of Star Fox 64, because the high points of this game were pretty high. Zone S and Macbeth were both incredible stages. In terms of recapturing that sin and punishment feeling, these parts came close for me. I wish that this game had just stuck to what it did best, because the rail levels in general were pretty good, and the tank and submarine variations added plenty of variety. I also really like how the wingmates are handled. Because they have to sit out a mission if you fail to protect them, it means that the actions you take in one mission affect the next one. I haven't talked about them yet, but there are 2 other allies, Kat and Bill, who only appear in specific missions, but if you help them out there, they'll return in the following mission to repay the favor. It's really interesting how the developers made this kind of continuity a priority. The voice acting was really fun, and there was a ton of it for a Nintendo 64 game. It was a lot harder to do audio on the N64 than it was on CD-ROM based consoles like the Sony PlayStation and the Sega Saturn, so this game having so much of it is genuinely notable. I want to play this game again someday with the original Japanese voice acting. I bet it has a very different vibe. I could criticize this game for its short length, but I don't feel like it's a problem. It's a game with an arcade-inspired structure, and so it should be approached like an arcade game, which is to say, played again and again for higher scores. When you hit the credits, the game doesn't just stop, it challenges you to continue on by assigning you a ranking that you just know you can improve upon next time. Score attack games get a lot more fun once you've learned them inside and out, and while I don't see myself getting to that point with Star Fox 64, I can totally see how so many other people have. One complaint that I do have in terms of the amount of content is that I wish that the routes didn't all converge back to Venom at the end. Shadow the Hedgehog the game has an Outrun-inspired structure very similar to Star Fox 64's, but with the key difference that Shadow the Hedgehog the game has several different final bosses depending on which route you take. Star Fox 64 technically has 2 different final bosses, but one is really just a preview of the other. It would have been cool if Star Fox had more endings, though I understand that comparing it to a game that was released 8 years later is not particularly fair. And even with this nitpick, I still think that the branching structure is one of the coolest aspects of this game. It works really well. In the end, I'm glad that I gave Star Fox 64 a second chance. It was annoying at times, but there were a lot of nice surprises too. Thank you so much for watching. I'm trying to rebuild my audience after a decade-long hiatus, so if you're enjoying these videos, please help me out by pressing the like button, the subscribe button, or by leaving a comment. I would really appreciate it. Okay, let's rank this game. I'm sorry to Star Fox 64, but it's an easy decision. This is my number 3 out of the 3 games that I've played so far. Don't misunderstand, I did enjoy most parts of this game, but overall I enjoyed Spyro the Dragon more. I will say though that one of the criticisms that I had of Spyro was its lack of supporting characters, and Star Fox 64 has a ton of distinctly memorable characters in it. Maybe that would have been enough to carry it to a higher position on this list if there had been more than literally one woman in it. So, My World My Way retains the number 1 slot, followed by Spyro the Dragon in 2nd place and Star Fox 64 in 3rd. My plan for this series is to focus on games that I expect to like, so there's no shame in taking last place. And the competition is only going to get tougher as I get more games on the list. In my next video, we'll be jumping forward to 2009, where I'll be playing a game that was released exclusively for the Nintendo Wii. And this time, it's not a first-party Nintendo game. I hope to see you back here then.